a Scottish valley of sloping meadows and wild woods, where pagan magic met Christian canon, there stands a royal castle filled with ghostly secrets and tragic tales. Here are legends to inspire Shakespeare, where medieval and Victorian worlds collide in a dazzling display of history. Tour these haunted halls of mystery, Glamis Castle, on the next Great Castles of Europe. Some 1,200 years ago, a lone missionary crossed the rich red soil of the Scottish valleys. His name was Fergus, come from Ireland, the land of St. Patrick. Much about this holy wanderer is lost in the dim record of ancient history, but this much is known. Fergus took his Christian teachings through this land, where he encountered people of a pagan kingdom. We call them the Picts, Latin for the painters. They were one of the most powerful groups to settle Scotland. Memorial stones and crosses mark their existence and reveal their Celtic roots. Striking examples of Pictish relics are found in the village of Glamis. Most notable is the man's standing stone, whose entwined creatures may represent a family emblem or the meeting of Christianity and pagan tradition. Fergus's journey ended here, at the border of the Glamis Burn, part of a gentle, fertile valley of Strathmore, a prosperous holding of the Pictish kingdom. The year was 710 AD. Here, the missionary's message was well received. He soon founded a church, and word spread of his teachings. The ranks of the converted quickly swelled. Legend says Fergus, who would one day be sainted, baptized many at a site along the river. A well placed there was named for him. Glamis would, for a time, be a place of pilgrimage. As the centuries passed, Christianity took hold here and across Scotland. At Glamis, the pilgrimages ended. As a holy place, its time had passed. But as a playground for kings, it was just beginning. Glamis' rich woodlands and gentle glens were full of deer and wild boar. For Scottish monarchs, it proved an irresistible hunting ground. Thus begins the history of Glamis Castle. Its humble start was as an 11th century hunting lodge, made simply of earth and timber. As the centuries passed, the simple structure would acquire an architectural complexity and a ghoulish reputation. Indeed, Glamis would become a genuine haunted castle, a birthplace of ghost stories and a stage for real-life tales of murder and betrayal. Here, William Shakespeare found the characters and the setting for his tale of ruthless ambition, the tragedy Macbeth. The castle resonates with the history of Macbeth. Legend says his grandfather, Malcolm, an 11th century Scottish king, was murdered here. In truth, King Malcolm did die at Glamis, but probably from wounds sustained while hunting deer. In Shakespeare's tragedy, Macbeth slew his first cousin, King Duncan, to seize the Scottish crown. Here, the supposed scene of that crime, King Duncan's Hall, named for the grisly event. History, however, tells us a different story. Macbeth did kill his cousin, but miles away from Glamis Castle, and under circumstances more honorable than those portrayed by Shakespeare. The real Macbeth and King Duncan met on the field of battle near Elgin in the year 1040. They broke away from the others to begin a duel to the death. Macbeth not only wanted Duncan's crown, he also wanted vengeance. Years before, Duncan's grandfather had murdered Macbeth's brother-in-law. The blood feud ran deep. It ran deeper still with the death of Duncan. Such were the days of a turbulent young Scotland when no slight between noble families went unpunished. Clan hostilities persisted for centuries. After killing Duncan, Macbeth in turn met his end at the hands of Duncan's son in the year 1057. Macbeth is buried here on the Isle of Iona in a graveyard richly planted with Scottish monarchs. He shares his resting place with King Robert II. It was Robert who placed Glamis Castle in private hands by granting it to Sir John Lyon in 1372. Four years later, Sir John fortified his good graces with the king by marrying his daughter, Joanna. The Lyon family would play prominently throughout royal Scottish history and live in Glamis Castle to its present day. In its early years as a family home, Glamis wasn't much to look at. But during the 15th century, the Lyons added the castle's centerpiece, the Great Tower, one of the oldest parts of Glamis still standing. Construction on the Great Tower began in 1435 and took about 50 years to complete. The tower's main hall, called the crypt, offers a taste of castle life during the Middle Ages. The air is chill and damp, the stone cold, even during the summer. Yet here the Lyon family spent most of their time. The crypt has remained largely untouched since the 15th century. This magnificent spiral staircase that leads from the crypt to the roof is a more modern addition, built 300 years later. It includes a rather primitive version of central heating. Vents were used to transport excess heat from the kitchen to other parts of the tower. For a time, life treated the Lyon family generously. They amassed great wealth and power. But tragedy soon stained the castle walls. The tragedy produced a ghost called the Grey Lady. Her tormented soul and the memory of a terrible deed haunt Glamis Castle to this day. The Grey Lady is said to be the ghost of Lady Glamis, who died in 1540. She was brutally killed, the target of an unchecked hatred by an obsessed Scottish king, King James V. James was the last of the Catholic Scottish kings and a leader in Scotland's struggle for independence against England. But he was also a bitter, lonely soul. Frequently, James eased his alienation by escaping to the woods, dressed in disguise to seek the company of gypsies and tramps. His habits earned him the nickname King of Commons. There, among his poorer subjects, James often sought solace in the arms of a woman. But sympathy for the monarch comes hard in light of his cruelty. The full force of his vindictive nature fell on the Scottish clan Douglas, the clan to which his much abhorred stepfather belonged. So deep was his hatred of his stepfather that James vowed to cleanse Scotland of the Douglas name. The castle at that time was in the hands of Lady Glamis, widow of the 6th Lord of Glamis. Her former name was Janet Douglas, a member of the Douglas clan. James charged Lady Glamis with witchcraft, and she was condemned to burn at the stake. The Scots were shocked and dismayed at what had befallen this much admired woman. It's said that all those present at the hideous scene of her death bowed their heads in shame. Heaping insult upon injury, James moved into Glamis Castle and appropriated its belongings. The king would live here for 4 years. But James's boundless cruelty eventually alienated his nobles and his armies. The rest of the king's reign was a chronicle of failure. His forces turned mutinous, and he was soundly defeated trying to invade England. James died shortly thereafter. At Glamis, his coat of arms still rests above the front door. After James's death, steps were taken to redress the injustices rendered during his reign. Lady Glamis was posthumously proved innocent of witchcraft, and the Glamis estate restored to the Lyon family. In a final act of reconciliation, James's teenage daughter visited Glamis Castle in 1562. Her name was Mary, Queen of Scots. The visit restored the bond between the Lyon family and the Scottish monarchy, and Mary strengthened a weak link among her nobles. She needed their support to stay balanced between Scotland's factious Protestants and Catholics. Glamis' present-day look is largely due to the efforts of Patrick, the 3rd Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn. Building on work begun by his grandfather, Patrick gave the castle a 17th century facelift and initiated a number of ambitious constructions. But Patrick had also inherited a host of problems. A castle sorely in need of repairs, and a debt of £400,000. Patrick's father had squandered the family fortune by financing part of Scotland's bishop wars. But Patrick, whose business acumen belies his rather whimsical way of dress, restored both the family fortune and the castle. He shored up his finances in part by acquiring capital, or cattle. Cattle breeding was a revolutionary idea at Glamis, but one that proved quite lucrative. These cash cows eventually bankrolled the castle's reconstruction. Patrick's remodeling campaign filtered into every crevice of the castle. Among his numerous additions and alterations, Patrick raised the central tower to new heights. And built the avenue that leads to the front door. When Patrick was finished, the castle displayed a unique blend of Scottish and French sensibilities, a melange of Norman-inspired turrets surrounding the classic Scottish tower house. But despite the charm and aesthetic appeal of Glamis, Patrick took an unassuming, even apologetic approach to his marvelous reconstruction efforts. In his diary, he expressed remorse for not seeking the counsel of a true architect and offered repeated apologies if his own architectural vision had gone awry in any way. But that is a part of the delight of Glamis, that it is a castle with real soul, a reflection of one man's sensitivities and quirks. Small flourishes, such as this wonderful Baroque sundial, celebrate his spirit and style. In that sense, Glamis has an organic quality, the result of which is pure Patrick. Inside the castle, Patrick created a real home. This was his favorite place, what he called the Great Hall. Today, it's the drawing room. Its arched ceiling of glorious plasterwork frames the 3rd Earl's family portrait. Patrick, seated in the center, is surrounded by his sons. Shown here at a later age, Patrick was a devoted family man who preferred home life to the world of politics. He adored his wife, Helen Middleton, of whom he wrote, "To have her in marriage, I thank God, has been very successful." On their wedding day, Patrick presented his cherished Helen with this magnificent cabinet. He surprised her with a key to its doors. Bits of Patrick's legacy are scattered throughout the castle, including King Malcolm's room. His wife Helen embroidered these wall hangings. Done in pettipoint design, they were originally used for a 4-poster bed. A close inspection reveals intricate floral patterns and other motifs worked straight into the linen. At the end of his life, the Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn saw his work finished. He had transformed Glamis from a debt-ridden structure into one of the richest estates in Scotland. The newfound wealth allowed the Lyon family to enter one of the most turbulent chapters in Scottish and English history, the Jacobite Rebellion. It was an uprising that centered on who held the right to be King of England and Scotland. James II, the original king, had been forced into exile following the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Those who supported James and his descendants were called the Jacobites. They wanted to restore the Stuarts to the throne and launched a guerrilla campaign that would last for 60 years.
Right, leave it, come on! Get out of here, mate!
The Lyon family sided with the Jacobites and paid dearly for it. John, the 5th Earl, was killed in battle in 1715. At one point, Glamis Castle played host to Prince James III, the new symbol of the Jacobite rebellion following his father's death in exile. But in the end, the Jacobite movement proved unsuccessful. Ending in the definitive Battle of Culloden in 1745, its political character soon replaced with harmless sentiment. Any traces of ill will toward England soon vanished from Glamis, when an important marriage followed that established bloodlines between the Scottish Lyon family and England. In 1767, John Lyon, the 9th Earl of Strathmore, married an Englishwoman of great stature, Mary Bowes. Above the fireplace in the drawing room, the entwined thistles of Scotland and the roses of England symbolize the union between two countries and two families. Life at the castle continued to prosper. In time, the family took the name of Bowes Lyon and acquired a seat in the House of Lords. Stepping into the modern world, the Bowes Lyon family represented all that was prominent and proper, the archetype of British aristocracy, 100 years away from its revolutionary past. But the crowning glory arrived in the 20th century, when a family member entered the realm of English royalty. On a wall in the dining room, a portrait reveals part of this royal connection. The woman seated is Countess Nina Cecilia Cavendish Bentinck. She came to live at Glamis after marrying the 14th Earl of Strathmore. One day she would be a famous grandmother, her granddaughter, a certain Queen of England. The Countess's bedroom, just as it looked at the turn of the century. This was her canopy bed. On the bed's pelment, she hand-embroidered the letters C. C for Cecilia and C for her husband, Claude, followed by the names and dates of birth of her 10 children. Her youngest, Elizabeth. What became of Elizabeth, this lovely woman who held a certain twinkle in her eye? She eventually married, had children, and became the Queen Mother. Glamis, in fact, is the Queen Mother's childhood home. This Italian garden, her playground. In the billiard room, among the glorious and rare tapestries, a teenage Elizabeth nursed wounded soldiers during World War I. The room had been temporarily converted into a hospital ward. This was the Queen Mother's private suite after she married. And it was in this part of the castle that she gave birth to Princess Margaret, the first time in 300 years a royal baby in line for the English throne was born in Scotland. But amid the celebrated joys and triumphs of Glamis, an eerie air still cloaks the castle. Stories heard here hint of dark secrets of the past. Many spring from a secret chamber thought to lie deep within the bowels of the crypt. One legend says this chamber is the home of a vampire, the unfortunate product of a family curse. The vampire pops up periodically in the family and hangs about for a few centuries, requiring a lengthy imprisonment behind this wall. Another version has a family member of limited repute playing cards in the chamber on the Sabbath, his partner, the devil himself. Together they made such a racket the room was finally covered and sealed. The only clue to the chamber's existence, an outside window, covered up and barred over. Other visitors from the netherworld are said to walk the castle halls, peer out of windows, and trip the unwitting visitor. The castle's forbidding feel has provoked unease in not a few guests. A celebrated visitor, Sir Walter Scott, was prompted to write that while at Glamis he felt himself too far from the living and somewhat too near the dead.